And welcome to episode 438 of Geektown Radio. I'm your host, Dave, and as it's a holiday in some areas of the US, the co-host this week is Robert. How are you doing?
I am doing good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. So which holiday is it today? Columbus Day, isn't it, I think?
Yeah, it got renamed to Indigenous Peoples Day, but...
That's right, yes.
Let's be honest, we still call it Christmas, even though it's mostly, happy holidays, so most people don't care. They know that all
it's
they know
a day
is
off. That's what they care about.
Well, it's a day off for me because I'm a government employee, but for most people, it just means the banks are closed and there's no mail.
Right. Okay. So what have you been doing and playing and watching recently?
Watching recently, it's mostly cooking competition shows because let's be honest, pretty much anything coming out, either TV or movie, is absolute garbage these days. Do they have a version of Crime Scene Kitchen over there in the UK?
I have heard of it. I'm not sure whether there's actually a version of it or whether they just run the US version over here, but I have heard of it, yes.
So it's an interesting concept. What it is, it's a baking competition, and they have the contestants. And the contestants have to go into a kitchen that has been used to make something. And they have to figure out what that something was based off of clues like ingredients used, equipment used, things like that. And then the competition isn't about making the best looking thing or the best tasting thing. It's on what comes closest to what was actually baked. So interesting concept of, celebrity judges. It's Curtis Stone and Yolanda Camp. So obviously, a couple of well-known people. Mm-hmm. And then for the host, it's Joe McHale because he doesn't have enough things to do being snarky.
I know. It's one of those people that just pops up on hosting so many different things. And acting and stuff. Yes, all over the place.
Like when they need somebody deadpan and snark.
Yeah.
So he's the perfect fit for that.
Yeah.
Last time I was on, I was talking about how August was the month of failures and nothing has changed since then. Joker 2 had an 83% fall off from its opening weekend. Beetlejuice 2 was already on rental over here in the States.
Wow.
Transformers 1, which actually I've heard is a really good movie, didn't do squat in the box office.
That seemed to really just disappear. Yeah.
Yeah. And the weird thing is that the number one weekend box office was something I'd never heard of called Terrifier 3, but it only costs it costs like $3-4 million to make, and it's already made $18 million. So, but yeah, TV show wise, I mean, it's early fall in America, which means all the sports all the time. I actually put that in the show notes. It just says sports ball.
Yeah.
So NFL is about a third of the way done now. MLB is in the playoffs, and probably the big thing is the WNBA is finishing up and Caitlin Clark is coming over to Europe. Now, have you seen or heard anything from her or about her?
I'm sort of aware of her. Yes. I know she's a basketball player and there was a few sort of news articles and stuff around her, but beyond that.
Yeah. So what it is that I know college sports, especially college sports leading into professional sports, isn't really a big thing in the UK. It's huge over here.
Yes.
I don't know if you've ever had a chance to go to a college sports the few times you've been over here in America.
No.
I mean, Ohio State University has a 110,000 seat football stadium that they sell out every home game. It's not even a question.
Yeah.
It's not even a question of if they sell out. It's sold out like 3 years in advance.
Jeez.
As soon as the games get announced, boom, gone. Can't even get to it.
Yeah.
So Caitlin Clark was playing university sports for University of Iowa. And to say she was literally the biggest thing to ever come out of women's sports from college is actually an understatement. Mm-hmm. So let me read off this list of creds here. Unanimous Associated Press All-American, Iowa's all-time leading scorer, most 30-point games by man or woman in Division I in the last 25 years, Big Ten all-time leader in assists, Iowa all-time leader in assists, Big Ten Player of the Week, the most number of times I've been named Big Ten Player of the Week, Big Ten all-time scoring record, Division I women's scoring record, single game scoring record, all-time all-time leader in points of any major women's college basketball players, Big Ten record for three-pointers, single season record for three-pointers, NCAA Division I men's and women's scoring leader, unanimous Big Ten player of the year, first team Big Ten, most three-pointers in a single season by any male or female player, first Division I women's player to score 1,000 points in 2 different seasons, career scoring leader in Big Ten, named most outstanding player in Big Ten, passed Tamika Johnson for most career assists in tournament history, passed Diana Tassuri for most career three-pointers in tournament history, tied Courtney Most for most threes in a game in tournament history, first NCAA tournament history with 3 40-point games, passed Taylor Robinson for most career 3 points in Division I history, Naismith Player of the Year 2 times, AP Player of the Year 2 times, Honda Sport Player of the Year 2 times, United States Basketball Writers Association Player of the Year 2 times, most points in a single quarter NCAA championship, passed Jimmy Holtzclaw for most career NCAA tournament points, second consecutive Wooden Award, third Nancy Lieberman Award, third player in Iowa program history to have her jersey number retired, and 2 consecutive James E. Sullivan's Awards. And all of that was in her senior year. Now, obviously, the consecutive awards go back her whole college because in America, you spend 4 years in college. That's the most you can play without like special circumstances.
Yeah.
So all that is kind of the culmination of that. So she came in to the WNBA with the most hype of any athlete I've ever. The closest that I can come to was when Larry Bird and Magic Johnson both came into the NBA in the same year because they had the whole rivalry going back through the whole college years. And that's get on YouTube and look up that history. We'll be here for a week talking about that. So she gets into the NBA, and dominate is also a massive understatement. I don't have time to go through everything.
Yeah.
But between actual records and milestones, she had 64. Jeez. It was either a record, and most of them weren't even records for rookies. They were just records.
Yeah.
Or like the league's never done it before, milestone.
Yeah.
She also brought in a ton of viewership.
Yeah.
The average home game for a WNBA game was 7,000. Any game she played in, whether it was home or away, averaged over 15,000.
Jeez. Wow.
Yeah. And do you know what her reward was for that was?
It'll be something pitiful. Go on.
She got the absolute kicked out of her.
Yeah.
So in basketball, there's what they call a technical foul. It's basically a red card.
Right. Yeah.
17% of all technical fouls for the whole season for all teams for the WNBA were against Caitlin Clark.
Wow.
80% of those technical fouls came from one team.
Jeez.
And the league did nothing. You can look up the highlights on YouTube and she'll just be literally standing there, nobody within 20 feet of her, and somebody would come up and just shoulder check her to the ground.
Jeez.
And so the team that she got drafted for hadn't been in the playoffs for a decade. She literally took that whole team on her back and drugged them kicking and screaming unwilling to the playoffs. And in the first 2 minutes of that first playoff game, one of the other team players stabbed her in the eye.
Oh.
And it's like not even accidental. Put your arm, if you're obviously not if you're driving, but if you can, put your arm up like you're going to high five somebody. So she was trying to block the ball. Now put your fingers down at a 90-degree angle and then put your wrist down at a 45-degree angle and poke straight down at somebody's eye. Oof. You can actually see that clip.
Yeah.
And that's, like I said, that was within the first 2 minutes of the game.
Ouch. Yeah.
So she did the only reasonable thing. She quit the WNBA and she's going over to Europe to play. So whichever Euro team gets literally the best player to come out of college, basically, period.
Yeah. I mean, I can entirely understand why she is quitting after all of dealing with all of that. But I hadn't realized she'd actually quit the WNBA. But that does not surprise me. I hope she finds a better reception over in Europe. And as you say, it's not a big sport over here, particularly basketball.
Well, I don't think it's about the sport, and it's definitely not about the money, because even before the WNBA season started, she signed some really lucrative endorsement contracts from sporting good places like Adidas and whatnot. So she's not going to be hard up for making money.
No.
Honestly, I wouldn't do it either. I wouldn't feel safe.
No.
Oh, by the way, the eye poke did not draw a foul.
How did that not draw a foul?
I don't know.
Crazy.
Imagine just being on the pitch and walking up and kicking somebody in the balls, and the refs are just like,
yeah, whatever.
Don't see a thing.
Wow.
Yeah, look that video up on YouTube. You can't look at that and say that was not intentional. That was, she's going for the eyes.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so that's the thing.
That's going to be interesting to see how WNBA gets on without her and what happens next with that. But yeah.
What happened was the TV ratings fell 75% after the team she was on was eliminated from the playoffs.
Wow. Yeah.
First round playoff game drew 1.4 million. The second round of the team that beat her team drew less than 400,000.
Jeez, that's crazy.
Yep.
So, well, yes, lots of sport going on though.
Oh yeah, lots of sports.
Well, I hope Caitlin Clark finds a better time over in Europe, certainly, because she deserves it.
Yeah.
And in terms of, other TV, the cooking shows are always kind of fun. And it amazes me how they manage to come up with different ideas for cooking shows. There's Is It Cake, which is literally a show about whether it's cake or not.
Because there's some decorators that do hyper realistic cakes. And I've looked at a few and I'm like, I would have no way of knowing.
Yeah, it is weird. It sounds like an awful idea for a show, but it's actually quite impressive. But yeah, there are some entertaining cooking shows out there. What about gaming? What have you been doing on the gaming front?
Mostly I've been playing the Final Fantasy Pixel Remastered. I just started with one. That was actually announced during Tokyo Game Show a few weeks back. So Final Fantasy 1 through 6 got what they call a Pixel Remaster, where it's an improved version of the game, but it maintains that 8-bit, 16-bit look, where some of the other remasters looks like chibi dolls came to life. But outside of that, there really hasn't been a whole lot that I've picked up. I do want to play Space Marine 2 at some point, but I want to get a better computer before I do that, because everything I've seen is just like when the Tyranids get serious on the screen, it bogs down machines. And I don't really need an upgrade for 90% of what I do, but it's kind of gotten to the point to where I kind of more want an upgrade than need an upgrade. But
I know the feeling. Yeah.
But with the new tech coming out, the mid-tier stuff is starting to get price decreases. So I'm seeing like bare bone build kits that are, coming in at $600-700, which is not a small amount of money, but it's not going to break my bank.
Yeah. It's always the thing with computers, though, particularly gaming computers. It makes buying cars look like a good investment. It's getting better than it was, but trying to figure out the best time to buy something is really tricky, because the moment you pick something up, there's always something else that comes out that you're like, oh, if I waited a month, then that would have been better. So it's quite difficult. But yeah, there are some good deals around. I'm okay with my rig at the moment. I've had it for a while though, and I'm getting to the point where I'm thinking maybe I should update some things, but I don't know. I'm sort of in the same position. I don't need to. It's playing things okay, but maybe I feel like I should.
And they just opened a Micro Center real close to where I live. It's a US chain brand, but think like the big box stores, but all computer parts. And I have to make myself not go in there because I know my credit cards just be like, no, mercy.
Yeah, there are some great ones that you can buy parts and build yourself. I've never actually built my own. I tend to go and use the online configurator things and do it that way, so not buying completely sort of off the shelf things, but
it's not hard, but it's frustrating because you're in a very, very limited space.
Yeah.
So you got your computer case and that's all the room you got.
Yeah.
And then you got a screw that's you got to do a weird angle or find a smaller screwdriver. And then it's, cable management if you want to do that. And it's not hard. Trust me, as somebody who's been in tech for 30 years, it's way easier now than it was 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah. It's just one of those things that it's so easy to go onto a site and kind of generally not that much, but you might pay an extra 50 quid to actually have somebody build it for you rather than you building it yourself. You can actually do it fairly cheaply.
Yeah. It's no different than changing your own oil or, flushing out your own fluids. It's just,
it's like you can do it, but it's sometimes a bit more easier. If you want to pay a little bit more, it's kind of more convenient to go on, use a configurator and just pay a little bit extra and let somebody else build it. Because at least, if it goes wrong, you can blame somebody for it as well. If you accidentally short something or that sort of stuff. So connect the wrong thing, it's like, that they're professionals doing it. So there's that. So for me, gaming wise, I've sort of finally completed Satisfactory 1.0. I can't remember. Have you ever played that game?
No, it's also on my list of I want to play it, but I know I'll be like, why is it 2026 now?
Yes, it does suck your time away. It's one of those things that I've sort of every spare moment I've been like stepping in and doing like little bits and pieces. I got to the point where I'd actually used a blueprint to set up the nuclear power eventually, money. And there's a really good sort of calculator and map system on a website that Satisfactory, if you Google Satisfactory calculator, it brings that up. And you can use that to sort of map out how you want to lay things out. You can also use it to import stuff as well if you want. And as I was getting like right to the end, I wouldn't necessarily call this cheating because I got the lines set up to be able to produce the final parts, because it's a factory building game and the object is to build specific set of parts that go into this space elevator to build this thing that you're trying to send off and save the world with. And I got to the point where I got the lines all set up to make the final parts and they were producing them. It's just they produced them really, really slowly. And I was like looking at it going, well, I can either wait and just leave the computer running for 24 hours to make all the parts that I need, or I can go into Satisfactory calculator and actually just get it to just fill up the output things, because you've got like crates, and just fill up the output crates with the parts as though it had been running for 24 hours. So I actually went and did that with the final save, just so I didn't have to wait like, 24, 48 hours for it to actually build all the parts up. I ended up completely finishing that. It was more of a sort of speed issue with that. It's such a good game. And some of the stuff that people produce in it is absolutely phenomenal. People building like weird Gothic architecture and futuristic towns and all sorts of stuff, when it is essentially just a factory building game, but people are producing some amazing, amazing stuff. I don't know how much it's up for on Steam at the moment, but it's well worth the money. It will suck hours of your life away though. So that's been really, really fun. I highly recommend that now it's in 1.0 release. I'm very interested to see what they do with that moving forward and what additions and updates, because they've been quite good with bug fixes. There are still a few little things, but nothing really, really major. It's been incredibly smooth. That launch runs pretty good from start to finish. And it's one of those games that I could see maybe they will sort of add and update things as they move along. I don't know whether they're talking about DLC or anything like that, but as a completed game, it's really fun and thoroughly enjoyable. If you like those sort of city building, factory building, base building sort of games, Satisfactory is one of the best out there. It's really worth picking up. There were also a bunch of TV finales this week. Bad Monkey and Slow Horses, both on Apple TV, Rings of Power on Prime. What streaming services have you got at this point? Because I know they're all horrifically expensive and you cut down a lot of them.
Yeah, I have Prime just because I have Prime delivery.
That's it, yeah.
And I use that a lot for sales and stuff. So I have that. I have Discovery Plus, which gets me a whole bunch of channels. The only three I really watch is Food Network, obviously, for my cooking competition addiction. HGTV, which is home renovation stuff, just because it's always fascinating and it's always really easy to see which shows are real and which shows are fake. And that's actually a funny meme to where it'll have like a couple in like an embrace and it'll say, he's a part-time squirrel trainer. She sharpens pencils on the side. Their housing budget is 1.5 million.
Yeah. No, you do look at some of those shows and it's like, where are you finding these people and what sort of money laundering operation have they got going on behind to be able to afford that? I know we get that over here with those sort of housing shows as well. It's ridiculous.
And then there's Discovery Channel, which has the all like the gold mining and the deep sea fishing stuff. And I like watching some of those shows and I'm just like, I would die doing that. I don't know if you've ever seen an episode of Deadliest Catch, but it's like 5 minutes of that and you're very thankful for your office job.
Absolutely, yes. In terms of the dramas though, I mean, Apple, we said, when me and Matt are talking, we often say that Apple has some of the best dramas on TV. And there are so many deals around for Apple subscriptions that it's probably the best deal in terms of ratio of great shows to the amount that it actually costs. I don't know how many dollars it is these days, but I mean, it's one of those things that's worth turning on for a couple of months just to be able to sort of binge through a bunch of things and then sort of switch it off again maybe for a bit. But they've had the two things finished recently, which was Bad Monkey and Slow Horses. Both have been great shows. I mean, Slow Horses is one of the best things on TV. It's absolutely outstanding. That's the show with Gary Oldman about sort of the screw-up part of MI5, the agents that get shoved into this place called Slough House, which he runs just full of the misfits. Latest season of that's been brilliant, and they've got another season coming as well. Bad Monkey had Vince Vaughn in the lead. That has been a really, really fun, interesting, funny show. There is talk of a second season of that as well. So that's been great. Rings of Power, of course, is the Lord of the Rings series. Gets some stick from some people, but I really enjoyed that series. It did a really solid job. It was interesting and fun. It still looked great, despite the fact that for reasons only known to them, they decided to abandon New Zealand for Scotland, given that New Zealand is Middle Earth to most people. I don't know what the decision for that was, considering they had to move all the sets and everything as well as the actors and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, it still worked really well. So I thought it looked great. I thought the story was solid enough. I know it's upset some Tolkien purists, but I thought they did a really good job with it. And it's an interesting part of the sort of Middle Earth lore that hasn't been told anywhere else. They've introduced the sort of early versions of some characters as well. And it's a really solid, enjoyable story. That's been good. And they've all had finales, and I thought they wrapped them particularly well. We are waiting to hear whether Rings of Power is coming back or not. They've invested a lot in those first couple of seasons, and it was ordered for 2 seasons, so we don't know whether that's coming back for a third or not. Slow Horses, as I say, is definitely coming back. Bad Monkey may be coming back for a second season, but we've got more on that in a bit. Another show I finished the whole thing of is a series called Ludwig, which stars David Mitchell, the British comedian. He plays this reclusive puzzle setter who takes on the persona of his twin brother when his twin goes missing, who is a chief detective inspector, basically to investigate the fact that he's sort of missing. And he's badgered into it by Lucy, played by Anna Maxwell Martin, who is James's wife. It's a bit like the setup for a standard sort of American network procedural, in that it's a sort of genius outsider that's thrown in to help out the police. But what I found quite interesting about Ludwig is he's very, very reluctant to do it. Whereas if this had been a sort of big American procedural, I think with a lot of those sort of things, they're put in because they've got caught, or they worm their way into the police because they want to show how clever they are. And with this, he really doesn't want any of that. He doesn't want anything to do with it. He's sort of doing it because his sister-in-law has kind of strong-armed him into it because he's a twin and he's the only person that could go in and pretend to be his own brother. So it's quite interesting what they do with that first season. And it ends really well in a way that they can take it forward. There has been talk of a second season of that as well. That's been very enjoyable, and I do hope they bring it back. But that's Ludwig. That's all on iPlayer in the UK. Apple have got another show as well called Disclaimer, which I've watched the first 2 episodes of, which are out on Apple TV. This is a mini-series from Alfonso Cuarón and stars Cate Blanchett. She's playing this famed documentary journalist who is mailed this novel in the post. And when she reads it, she starts to realize it is about her and is revealing secrets about something that happened in her past. It's really kind of interesting how that all sort of starts to come out. Cate Blanchett is great in the sort of lead role. Kevin Kline plays the person who you find out fairly quickly is the person that actually centered the book. And there is also this story of this young couple that are backpacking around Europe and are in Italy. And those stories all end up sort of clashing together. First 2 episodes of that are out, been really, really good. It's got Sacha Baron Cohen in it as well, who actually plays Catherine's husband, but he's not playing a comedy role and he's completely unrecognizable. It's very, very straight. Good cast, well directed, interesting story. Definitely one worth checking out on Apple TV, that one. And that's called Disclaimer.
Yeah, I have caught a couple of commercials from that on YouTube. I don't know how it's marketed in the UK, but over here, it almost came off like a sex crime thing.
Well,
at least how it was marketed.
Yes, there is a certain amount of that in it. With the opening 2 episodes, there certainly does seem to have been a relationship between this younger man and Catherine, who is the character played by Cate Blanchett, which is what comes out in the book. But we don't know exactly what happened at the moment. So, yeah, I mean, there is a certain amount of that in it. Over on Netflix, Outer Banks returned for the first half of season 4. I love that show. Thoroughly enjoyable. Way, way better than it's supposed to be. It is sort of, you know, as I I've said before, what if you shot the Goonies with the cast of a CW show? It's incredibly pretty people solving these mysteries. This time around, they're trying to find treasure related to Blackbeard, which was sort of set up at the end of the last season. So it's a new thing they're kind of going after. Solid opening start. They've only released part 1 right now. Part 2 comes, I think, next month. The first few episodes of that has been great. And there is another show called Sweetpea, which is on Stars in the US and Sky Atlantic over here. That is an adaptation of a book. It stars Ella Purnell in the lead role. She plays this character called Rhiannon, who basically led this fairly quiet life in adulthood, but she's not happy. She's working as an admin assistant at a local newspaper, but he's effectively a glorified secretary. She's disrespected by everybody. She's got this little dog that she keeps. It's about the only thing she loves in life, and her father, who is critically ill and in a hospital bed. It comes out that, she was bullied at high school. She's just kind of very meek and kind of very timid. Her sister doesn't understand her, and he's kind of high flying and fairly obnoxious to her. And it gets to a point where a bunch of things happen across 1 or 2 days, and she just snaps and completely changes the direction of her life. Opening episode of that was really, really good. Worth checking out. I think it's all on Sky over here, but it's on Stars in the US if you want to go and check that out. And it's called Sweetpea, but it's a sort of dark comedy drama. So, I know you say there isn't a lot of good TV around. The problem is there is good TV around if you're prepared to pay for services that have it. And that's part of the problem, I think.
Yeah, Netflix went up. Disney Plus subscription went up again.
Yeah.
Stars is a knockoff, movie pay per month viewing service like HBO and Showtime and Cinemax. I actually have seen, not Ludwig, but I do know who David Mitchell is, mostly from clips that I see from Would I Lie to You?
Yes.
And weirdly enough, I actually met Vicky Corin a long time ago, back in my early poker days, back in like the early 2000s.
Yes.
No way she would remember me, because I think I met her twice in 2005.
Wow.
But have you ever seen that clip where David Mitchell says that when he wants to punish Vicky, he finds all the books that she's reading, because apparently she reads a bunch of books at the same time, and then just rearranges the bookmarks. And I'm like, that's how when somebody knows you so well that if they wanted to hurt you, they could hurt you really bad. And obviously he was lying, but the look on her face is like, did that son of a bitch actually do that? Priceless. Look, another thing to look up on YouTube. Obviously that was a lie, thankfully, because he actually loves his wife.
Yes.
But just that concept of trolling somebody so subtly, I love it.
Yeah, I do love that as well. He's very, very, very funny, and she's great, and they seem like really well matched and very, very fun together. Would I Lie to You is a great show as well. Worth looking that up if you've not seen that. There are clips of it on YouTube, like you say, so go and check that out as well. But David Mitchell's fantastic. He's great on QI as well when he pops up on there. That is coming back as well soon, so worth checking that out. I think he's on the new season as well. That's all the stuff we've been doing this week. Let's move on to some TV and film news. So we start off the TV and film news with the renewals, cancellations, and pickups. Netflix has had the axe out a bit this week. We've had cancellation of Unstable, which was Rob Lowe and Son, where he played this sort of tech mogul, and his son was sort of the reluctant person that was brought in to keep his dad in line. That's been cancelled after 2 seasons. Basically a numbers thing with that. Failed to break into the Netflix top 10, meaning that it drew fewer than 1.4 million views in its opening weekend and fewer than 1.3 million views in its first week. So just wasn't rating well for its second season, so that got canned. Chaos, which is the one which has upset an awful lot of people, that was the Jeff Goldblum series, and it was set around the idea of a sort of alt history where the Greek gods were the sort of central religion, based around this sort of prophecy that Jeff Goldblum's character sort of has of his family collapsing and sort of whether he brings on the prophecy on himself. Critically incredibly incredibly well received. It's from the guy that wrote End of the Effing World, and it's a really, really, really good series. It's one of the best things I think I've seen on Netflix in a very, very long time. So, of course, they cancelled it after one season. Incredibly well received and good reviews across the board. But the viewership wasn't that high and really frustrating. I mean, it was around the same level of Dead Boy Detectives, which also got cancelled. It was in between that and something else, which with another cancelled show. So the problem is that Netflix don't really give anything a chance to grow. I mean, that has not been out that long. It's maybe a month and a half that has been out. And I think that has become a real problem for them in the fact that they are cancelling this stuff that is critically very well received. And rather than trying to promote it more and going, hey, look at not the numbers for this show, but look at the reviews this show's of sending the cast out to maybe do some more promo for it. Rather than getting behind things, they're just going, oh, well, the numbers aren't great, cancel it. And they're now getting a reputation for cancelling things after one season, which then becomes this circle of, well, I'm not going to watch a Netflix show because they'll cancel it after one season. Nobody watching this show in the first season because people think it'll cancelled. Oh, it's not got the high enough numbers. We're going to cancel it. And it ends up with this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, which is ironic for chaos. But there you go. So it's something that they desperately need to look at because it's a real, real problem for them. And not just looking at the numbers and actually looking at whether a show is actually a reasonable quality and they can afford to give it a bit more time to sit on the system and push it a bit more. It's a real issue that they need to sort out.
A lot of it is advertising because, I don't get commercials for any of the streaming services. The only time I ever see anything is if I'm on Amazon Prime Video wanting to stream a show and it just, pops up, add $5 a month to Prime for this channel or $10 a month to Prime for this channel.
Yeah.
But I never see it like regularly advertised. As for the cancels, I'm used to that. I mean, hell, I went through Firefly, which was very highly rated.
Yeah.
And it's weird being old because every now and then a YouTube video recommendation will come up and it's somebody that's like in their early 20s are reacting to that show for the first time. They have no background on it. They have no basis for it. And I'll watch them every now and then. And the consensus seems to be, how did this show get canceled? It's awesome.
Yeah. It is an interesting one, certainly Firefly, and people will not let it die. I mean, we did a panel with Joel, Sean, and Nathan for Firefly. There was a panel at, I think it was Wales Comic Con. It's up on our YouTube channel, which is a wonderful panel. There's some great stories in it. There's one particularly about Adam Baldwin basically adopting a fan for an evening as they went to a premiere, and it's hilarious, that story. But Nathan talks about the fact that, the people won't let it die. They've got people that are coming up as parents with teenagers that they've introduced their kids to it, and their kids are now huge fans, and they're coming up in brown coat cosplay and stuff at conventions. It just keeps going.
Yep. And technically, I think Disney might own the rights.
They do.
It was a Fox show, and Disney bought Fox, so they could bring it back. Although with everything that Disney's come out with the last couple of years,
yeah, I mean, it's tricky, and it's also the Joss Whedon issue as well at this point. I mean, yes, I would love to see them bring it back. How they would do that, I'm not sure, but I think there is possibly something you could do with that, whether it's a movie or I don't know. But it was great.
Well, they did do the one movie, but
they did, yeah.
I think all the fan stuff on YouTube, as long as Disney doesn't go mad like Nintendo and sues them all into oblivion.
Yes, there's been novels and comic books and all sorts of other things as well. But I would be nice if you could find a way of bringing that show back in some ways. Still got more cancellations as well. Max has cancelled Velma, which was the Mindy Kaling animated series. That's gone.
I thought they already canceled that like 6 months ago.
Yeah, people keep saying that. It was like that was still going, which, I mean, I suspect the numbers weren't particularly high. I know it wasn't particularly liked the way they handled it, but that's gone after 2 seasons. And Starz has cancelled The Serpent Queen, which was all set and prepared to do a 3rd season, I think, to the point that the cast were all under contract for it. So they've cancelled the third season, but they've actually had to pay the cast for the third season, even though they're not filming it. So it saved them some money, but not as much as it would have done had they thought of cancelling that earlier. But starred Samantha Morton as Catherine de Medici. Basically lack of viewers for the second season, not helped by the fact that there was a huge 2-year gap between the seasons, which I know is not uncommon for big dramas at this point. And they did have a strike and stuff in the middle of it, so fair enough. But it was critically well received. But again, it's something else that's been cancelled because critically well received, but numbers were low. There is talk of a Queen Elizabeth I spin-off starring Minnie Driver, who played that role in a guest spot on The Serpent Queen. There's possibility that they may sort of continue it in some way with the same team, with Minnie Driver playing Elizabeth I, which is fine if that's what they want to do. But the main Serpent Queen is not coming back for a third season. On to the renewals, though. Netflix did actually hand out a couple of fairly sizable renewals. Not surprising in that, particularly the first one, The Night Agent, which is basically their biggest show, or one of their biggest shows. The numbers for the first season were absolutely astronomical. They've given that an early season 3 renewal before the second season lands in early 2025. So that's the thing. If it's got the numbers, they're quite prepared to stand behind it, but they're not prepared to stand behind it if it's creatively good, but let it grow. Whereas the numbers for The Night Agent were off the charts pretty much in the first couple of weeks. So they've prepared to back that for a third season before the second season lands. They're also backing The Diplomat for a third season before the second season premieres, which is coming in the next month or so. So The Diplomat is coming back, but that's been renewed for a third season as well. So as I say, that's the interesting thing. If they've got the numbers for the first season, they are prepared to stick their neck out a bit. It's just that if you're a first season show and you're critically well received, but they haven't got the eyeballs on it, they're not prepared to even consider it.
Well, that's the thing really with streaming, is that there's no ambiguity in how much somebody is watching something. You can track minutes watched. Obviously, You don't know how many people are watching it because it's a single account, but they know exactly how many minutes of time watched for each show is.
Yeah, and that's fine, but it needs not to be the only metric, I think. There needs to be some sort of human intervention outside of the algorithms or the spreadsheet that they get that just says these numbers are great. You know, there needs to be somebody looking at the creativity of some of those shows and going, okay, well, what can we do to support this? That is something like Chaos, which is a show which is critically well received. It's something that can help promote the fact that they're making quality material and get more eyeballs on it. And rather than actually supporting that, they just sort of drop kicking their shows, which is a real shame. They've also renewed Erin Foster's Nobody Wants This, which ironically has been renewed for a second season. That was a rom-com starring Kristen Bell and Adam Brody, apparently, but that has been back for a second season as well. Over on Prime Video, Reacher has got a fourth season renewal before the third season has even aired. That's more common over on Prime. They will take a look at a show, even in its first season, and go, we like this, we'll order a second season. That's on top of the spin-off that they're doing, which is focusing on Maria Steiner's Neely. So they've got that spin-off series coming, and they've got a fourth season coming on top of the third season, which lands later. That's good news. That was really good, actually. I don't know whether you caught that on Prime.
Yeah, I've seen it. It's really good. It's just very simple, old school, badass.
Yeah.
And the Neely spinoff I had not heard, but I'm interested in because that is an interesting character of somebody, you know, being in the army, then going into private investigations, but has that thing with not wanting to touch people.
Yeah.
Because there's some interesting dynamics you can play with that.
Yeah, definitely. And I thought she was great. And I'm really interested to see what they do with that. I mean, Reacher was a phenomenal series out the gate. So I'm very happy that they've decided to make sure that that's going to be back for a full season. And Trigger Point, which is the Vicar McClure show on ITV over here, that she plays the bond disposal expert. She's coming back for a third season of that as well. That's been a really good show. That will be returning for season 3, which they're filming next year. So some good renewals there as well. Some good news on that. On to pick up some other news. WBTV, Warner Brothers, the boss there, who's a person called Channing Duggery, has been talking about the state of a couple of their projects. Ted Lasso, season 4, there has been talk of that, even though they did say that the third season was going to be the final season. They are now talking about making a fourth season. No actors locked in yet, but they are in early production conversations. So there is some possibility that that will happen. There is a will to do it. It does somewhat rely on Jason Sudeikis as well. But I know Matt's opinion on this was it ended well. I'm not sure this is a good idea. I haven't watched any of Ted Lasso, so I can't tell you one way or another. But
you should watch it. It's really, really good.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that the character was actually created for a commercial when NBC here in the States got the broadcast rights to the Premier League.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they, Jason Sudeikis, who's, very well-known comedian, lots of movies he's been in that he's hilarious in. They just came to him and said, hey, we're introducing Premier League. We need you to come up with an idea. And so he came up with a concept of a guy that's never coached football before to try to coach a football team. And that was like a commercial. And then like 3 years later, they made a show out of it.
Wow. I didn't realize that was its starting point. But yes, that's awesome. So there is potentially a fourth season they're talking about. But like I said, no actors locked for that yet. And I think some of it will hinge on how they deal with Jason Sudeikis as Ted Lasso and what his involvement will be in that. They are about 95% of the way of closing a deal to keep J.J. Abrams' Bad Robot at WB. I think he's been there for like 10 years and they're trying to sort of make sure that they lock him in to staying at WB. The thing is, I'm not entirely sure why, because it's not like he's done any huge hits in the last 10 years. I looked up the list of things for Bad Robot recently and there's really nothing that stands out particularly. 2015, they did Force Awakens. 2016, they did Star Trek Beyond, but again, that wasn't for WB. There's the Cloverfield Paradox. I mean, Mission Impossible Fallout, but again, not for WB, it's for Paramount. Rise of Skywalker, but for Disney. So movie side of things, there really hasn't been anything particularly. And the stuff that they've got coming up is all kind of vaporware things. I mean, there's another Star Trek movie allegedly in the works, but that's been talked about for a while. JJ has an untitled film in production. There is a film called The Pinkerton, directed by Jason Bateman. That is for Warner Brothers. There's one called Billy Summers, which is for Warner Brothers. There's a Hot Wheels movie, apparently, for Warner. There is a Portal movie based on the video game for Warner and Valve. Another Cloverfield film, Constantine sequel, and an Elseworld Superman film. But again, the Constantine and Superman things, unless they actually start filming something, I don't believe that they're ever actually going to get off the ground. So I don't know. And TV series wise, again, they did Westworld and then Castle Rock, Lovecraft Country, which sort of went down okay, I guess, in 2020. And they were involved in Presumed Innocent, which was the Apple show, but the Warner Brothers TV were involved in that. And their most recent thing was Batman Caped Crusader, which had a very mixed reaction to the point that, they kicked it off Max and sold it to Prime Video. So it wasn't particularly well liked internally. And when I saw it, I was like, not really what I wanted. So I don't know. There's not really much that, a Portal movie could be kind of interesting, but again, it's whether it actually happens or not, because there's been all sorts of projects that JJ supposedly involved in and then have disappeared completely. So I don't know. I don't know what the benefit is to keep him based at their studio particularly.
Yeah, the only thing you can guarantee with JJ Abrams is that the lens flares come early and often.
Yes, that is true. With that list of stuff, there's nothing really. I presume you played Portal?
Yeah, a long time ago.
Me too, but I think that could make potentially for an interesting film. I'm not sure whether anybody wants that Constantine sequel particularly, or
I vaguely just remember seeing Keanu Reeves say that he would be up for doing the sequel if it's based off of his character in the movie.
Yeah.
Although the guy that did it for the Arrowverse,
Matt Ryan,
probably more likely to get that role.
No, I think if they are going to do a sequel it would be a sequel to the Keanu Reeves one, which is fine. And if you like that film, but it's not the Constantine character of the comic books. It's an entirely different iteration of it and played in a very different way. So I don't know. It's weird. They haven't really done a huge amount of big hits or anything. So, but I don't know what the advantage to keeping them at WB is, but there you go. They apparently are sorting out a deal for that. Bad Monkey, as I mentioned earlier, there is talk of a second season of that. There is a second novel called Razor Girl by the same author, and it is a sequel novel to Bad Monkey. So there is a book to base that off. So they've not greenlit that yet, but there is talk of Apple doing that. The other thing is the other Big Bang Theory spin-off, because you know you've got the George and whatever it is, the one that's on CBS right now. Mm-hmm. There's that one, which is a spin-off from Young Sheldon. There is one from the main Big Bang show, which is a spin-off which is being done for Max. They've actually revealed that some of the people they have actually got talent holding deals with, which is kind of interesting because it's Kevin Sussman, who played Stuart, the comic book manager, Brian Poshen, who played the geologist Bert, and Lauren Lapkus, who played Denise, who is the assistant manager of the comic book store and Stuart's girlfriend. They've all been put on talent holding deals. So presumably the show would be based around the comic book store in some way, given that's the cast that are involved. And there is some possibility that the original cast could drop by in that, but they wouldn't be regulars. So it's not like doing a Young Sheldon thing. It is a continuation of the main universe of Big Bang, if you like, which is an interesting direction to go. Not necessarily what I was sort of expecting, because you were thinking, well, maybe they've done Young Sheldon, maybe they'll take a young somebody else. But no, they're not doing that. It's a continuation of the sort of main series by the looks of things. I don't know. I mean, set in a comic book shop, if that is what they're going for by the sounds of it, I think there is potential for something there.
Well, the spinoff for Young Sheldon made kind of sense in that because at the end of Big Bang, they had him, win the Nobel Prize. Mm-hmm. And that whole season was just his memoirs, as it turned out.
Yeah.
A very revisionist history from what they established in Big Bang versus what they showed in the show.
Right.
I had kind of fallen off the last couple of years of Big Bang. It just never held the appeal anymore. Mm-hmm. The comic book show, I think realistically would be a hard sell because comic book stores are kind of dying over here in the States.
Yeah.
Comic book sales are falling off way hard. People are transitioning way more to manga than comic books.
Well, it's not just transitioning to manga as well. It's also the fact that if you actually want to read the stories, you can pay 50, 70 pounds and go and get the app for a year, either DC or Marvel or both, which is what I do, and read them digitally. I mean, I know there is a tactile thing about collecting comic books, and I understand that. But equally, if you just want to read the stories, you can go and get the apps rather than going to a comic book store and they're delivered to you once, twice a week, whatever, directly into the app, and you can pick it up and read it anytime you like, and they're all there, and you've not got to carry a bookshelf around with you if you want to read them. So I think that's the other thing. But I mean, it is owned by Marvel and DC, those two sort of big apps, and there are other ones as well. But that sort of subscription model works, I think, and that's cannibalizing actual physical paper sales, which is going to be destroying like comic book stores as well, I suspect. I don't know. There is potentially something in that, I think, possibly of, a dying comic book store. There is something you could possibly do with that. But
all entertainment media going digital. I mean, honestly, think about it. When was the last time you went to a store and bought a music CD?
Well, yeah, exactly. Or even, I've got tons of Blu-rays and that sort of stuff on shelves. And I couldn't tell you the last time I picked one up. And actually, in fact, I don't think I've even got a player downstairs at this point because you find everything digitally. It's so much easier to just get it online than it is to physically go out and buy something. And then particularly with the comic books, I went from every few months maybe spending 50 quid on a bunch of comic books. Now I just pay a subscription once a year, which is 50 or 70 quid, and get them all straight into an app, So just for the cost, it's worthwhile. So yeah, I think there's that as well. That's the thing. It's not an inconvenience. It's also cheaper and just the way it is. Moving over onto Netflix, they're apparently developing a Pride and Prejudice series. And I mean, I know this stuff sells, but I am kind of like, why do we really need another version of Pride and Prejudice? It apparently hasn't got green lit yet. It's from Everything everything I know about Love creator Dolly Alderton. She's written the script. No casting yet. It's from Lookout Point 2 with the producers of Gentleman Jack and a number of other shows. It will be Netflix's first Austen adaptation since they did Persuasion in 2022, which starred Dakota Johnson. I know this sort of, look at Bridgerton. I know the kind of stuff sells, but there's so many versions of Pride and Prejudice out there. Do we really need another one at this point? Over on Peacock in the US, there is apparently a follow-up series to The Office, which I hadn't heard about, but it's not another version of The Office because, we've got things like The Office Australia now, and there was obviously the US Office was a version of the UK Office, and they've made them in multiple languages. This isn't that. This is a follow-up to the US version of The Office, but rather than following the people in The Office, it's following the documentary crew who are trying to find their next project. So they're searching for a new subject when they discover a dying historic Midwestern newspaper and the publisher who's trying to revive it with volunteer reporters. They have got some cast involved. Donald Gleason and Tim Kaye, who names you probably know. Ramona Young, who was in Legends of Tomorrow and Z Nation. Sabrina Impactatori, who is in White Lotus. And Melvin Gregg, who is in Snowfall, are some of the names you might recognize from in there. I mean, Donald Gleason, Tim Kaye are great comedy actors, I think, would work really well in something like this. I think this is maybe an interesting way of taking the sort of idea of The Office, of that sort of fly-on-the-wall documentary comedy style, and transporting it to something else. And a dying newspaper seems like an area which I think might work, particularly in the Midwest.
As long as they give it their own identity and don't make it just another Office, it'll be fine. It's like with Parks and Recs. Once they let Parks and Recs stop trying to be The Office, but in government employees, and let it be its own thing, that show went gangbusters. It also didn't hurt that, Chris Pratt is on it and they just let him be as wacky and goofy as they wanted to be. And he had some just amazing improv stuff. Nick Offerman being the old oak tree versus the hyperkinetic Leslie, played by Amy Poehler. And this is one of the rare times I'll ever say this. Watch the first season to know who the characters are, but don't judge the rest of the show based off the first season.
Right, yeah.
Because when they were filming the first season, Amy Poehler was actually pregnant at the time. So they had to hyper compress the shooting schedule. So the cast didn't really get a chance to vibe. And like I said, it was way too much like trying to be The Office with all the inner conflict and, trying to get the Dwight and Jim butting heads, pranking, things like that. They tried that too much. And then once the second season rolled around and they just let people be more relaxed and flesh out their own characters, you got a great dynamic with Chris Pratt and Aubrey Plaza with those two characters.
Yeah.
Adam Scott, when they brought him in with Rob Lowe for season 3, and his character playing off of Leslie was very interesting. And then just Rob Lowe was hilarious in that season. Being so button tight was just a joy to watch.
Yeah, I mean, that is a great show. And I think you're right. It needs to have its own identity if this is going to work. We don't know what it's going to be called yet. I mean, given the first one was called The Office, maybe they'll just go with something like The Newspaper. But this is in development right now. It's got a cast attached to it. I think they've picked it up. So it will be coming. It's been done for Peacock in the US. Don't know exactly where it'll land over here, but presumably Sky, given that it's Peacock, but that's not always the case. But yeah, Donald Gleason, Tim Kaye, good cast. I don't really know any of the others, but good people involved in it. So that could be interesting. Talking about bringing back versions of other shows, Bill Lawrence has been interviewed recently. He was the person behind Scrubs. And we talked a little bit previously about a Scrubs reboot, but apparently they're saying that it is very close to becoming a reality. The problem has been that Bill Lawrence is under an exclusive overall deal with Warner Brothers, but Scrubs is owned by Disney. So they've got to iron out how that will work in terms of the licensing and all that sort of stuff. But they seem to be heading towards that becoming a reality. Scrubs 2.0, as it's been called, they're talking of it being a hybrid between a sort of revival, revisiting the original characters a decade and a half after the original series ended its run, and a reboot by revamping the concept with new characters, which is sort of what they tried to do with that very final season of it, and it fell flat on its face.
Oh, that final season was god-awful.
Yeah. However, I think given there is some distance between it now, I think could work. And I think they're probably right. I mean, you couldn't just bring back the original cast and do the same thing again, because it does need the sort of vibrant, young, wide-eyed doctors wanting to sort of get into the world and do the right thing. It sort of needs those characters in there. But it would be interesting to bring back some of the original ones that have maybe spent a lot longer in the system at this point, and maybe their attitudes have slightly changed. So I think there's more interesting things you can play with in that. And they're all still friends, still get on with each other. They all hang out with each other. They do podcasts together.
Zach Braff and Donald Faison do T-Mobile commercials all the time over here.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we talked about some of this before, because Zach Braff was in Bad Monkey, which is one of Bill Lawrence's shows, I think. He and Bill Lawrence hang out all the time. He actually, I think, went on holiday with Sarah Chalke and their family. Yeah, their families went on holiday together, I think he said. And Zach and Donald do, I think, a Scrubs rewatch podcast together as well. So they're all still mates and they all still hang out. And I can sort of see them bringing people back together and that potentially working as a possibility. So, yeah, I mean, I quite like the original Scrubs. I think, apart from that last season, which was garbage, like you said. Interested in seeing this?
No, not really. I mean, I really liked Scrubs. Fun fact, the reason why they never gave the janitor a name is because in the first season, he was just supposed to be one of the figments of Zach Braff's imagination.
Right, yes.
But he tested so well that he became like a normal person. Because if you really, really watch that first season, he doesn't interact with a whole lot of people outside of JD.
Yeah, kind of interesting that, but they ended up bringing him back as that. And I mean, I think he would be a great character to bring back in as well. He's still around, so you could bring Neil Flynn back in as the janitor. That could be kind of cool. I don't know whether this will work or not, whether it's a good idea. Who knows? But I think they all know each other, and I can see why there is a possibility that they may want to do that again. In terms of actual new shows, HBO's Lanterns, which is obviously a Green Lantern series, it's based on the Green Lantern comic books, follows new recruit John Stewart and Lantern legend Hal Jordan, two intergalactic cops drawn to a dark Earth-based mystery as they navigate a murder in the American heartland. They have talked about this being sort of rather more gritty than sort of, an Earth-based rather than a big space adventure. They've got casting for it now as well for those two leads. Aaron Pierre is playing John Stewart, who I don't particularly know him, but he was in Rebel Ridge, which I think was a Netflix movie, which debuted really quite well for Netflix. He also apparently voicing Mustafa, a young Mustafa, in the Lion King prequel movie. He has actually played a DC character before. He was on that. Do you remember Krypton? That fairly short-lived show. I think it did 2 seasons.
I vaguely remember seeing commercials for it.
Yeah.
But I think it was on a streaming service, so I could never watch it.
I think it was on Sci-Fi, I seem to remember. But he played Dev M in that, apparently, as well. So when I mentioned this casting, anybody that had seen Rebel Ridge going, oh, wow, he's really good at leading Rebel Ridge. He looks the part as well. So I think that's probably a decent bit of casting. Hal Jordan, they've cast Kyle Chandler, probably best known for Friday Night Lights, where he played Coach Eric Taylor. He was also in Bloodline, that Netflix series, but he's one of those faces that pops up in things and you go, I've seen him in something before. So he was in things like Zero Dark 30, he was in some of the Godzilla movies, he was in Super 8, he was in Argo, but he's popped up in a million different things. I think he's a really interesting choice for the sort of older Hal Jordan. I mean, it does look like this James Gunn iteration of the DC universe is going to probably have John Stewart as their main Green Lantern, and Hal Jordan is going to be a sort of secondary character, which, whilst for me and you, I think Hal Jordan's probably the Green Lantern, for an entire generation, John Stewart is their Green Lantern because he was in the animated shows and that he was always the one that was at the forefront. So I sort of understand why they're going down that route for it. I'm sort of intrigued by this series to see how this is going to work as a sort of an Earth-based, grounded kind of Lanterns series, given their intergalactic cops. But I don't know. It could be an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, I do like his casting as being like a more older, gritty version of that. What's really interesting is he's uncredited in the ABC show A Million Little Things because his character dies off in the first episode, but you occasionally get him in flashbacks.
Right.
The fact that he's uncredited in that is really weird.
Yeah. He also is in the first episode of Mayor of Kingstown as well.
But he is listed on IMDb for that. So
yeah. But just talking about him getting killed off, he gets killed off in the first episode of Mayor of Kingstown as well, because that's Jeremy Renner's show, and he plays the brother, and the brother dies in the first episode. Sorry, spoilers for anybody that hasn't seen it. The brother dies in the first episode, but you kind of know that because it's called Mayor of Kingstown and Jeremy Renner is the lead. So you kind of know that something's going to happen to him because he is the mayor of Kingstown when the show starts. So you kind of know that he's not going to be sticking around because Jeremy Renner takes over. But that's another show that he dies in the first episode of. But he does do quite a lot of those sort of little guest roles in things where he's there for a day or something and like turns up and like gets killed off and then that's it. But I mean, he's a great actor and I think he's a really, really good pick for Hal Jordan for this.
Yeah, a lot of it obviously depends on the script.
True.
But as a casting, as long as they're making him like an older, seasoned Lantern helping the new kid out, I could easily see that working well.
Yeah, and I mean, that does seem to be the route that they're going down for this. I'm okay with that. I think that's a reasonable way to do it, and then have Jon Stewart as the main Lantern going through. The writing credits for the series as well are kind of interesting because it's Damien Lintoff who did the Watchmen series, so he has some comic book background. Chris Mundy, who was involved, showrunner of Ozark, and he's done things like Criminal Minds and True Detective. So he's done those sort of dark, gritty detective shows. And the other person that's involved is Tom King, who is a brilliant, brilliant comic book writer and has written a ton of DC stuff, particularly Batman. He's done other things, he's done, I think, Green Lantern runs as well. And so I rather like the fact that they've got a comic book writer involved. They've got somebody that knows comic book TV shows with Damien Lintoff, and then you've got somebody who knows those sort of gritty cop things as well. So I think the writers behind it are a really interesting group. I think it has potential, that certainly, but we'll have to wait and see. We made for HBO. We don't know necessarily where it'll land in the UK because at the moment, Sky have a deal for HBO content. That runs out at the end of 2025, at which point Warner Brothers are going to launch the Max streaming service. But as we mentioned a few weeks ago, there is some back and forth with Sky suing Warner Brothers over breaches of contract right now. So depending on how that plays out, I mean, we don't know whether that's going to affect things like this and where it lands. But hopefully we'll get it somewhere. That's all the news we've got for this week. Just some highlights for next week on TV next. So, highlights for next week on TV. We have Nevermind the Buzzcocks returning for season 4. That's the music quiz with Greg Davis. That's on Sky Max on the 16th of October at 9 p.m. You've got Shrinking returning for its second season. That's the Jason Segel and Harrison Ford show about the therapists. That's coming for season 2 on the 16th of October. Jurassic World Chaos Theory, that returns for its second season on the 17th of October. That's on Netflix. 911 Season 8 Part 1. That returns on the 17th of October as well. That's on Disney+. The Lincoln Lawyer, which is the brilliant David E. Kelly drama based on Michael Connelly's books, that is back for a third season. That's on the 17th of October. Also on the 17th of October on Channel 4, you've got season 2 of Everyone Else Burns. That returns at 10 p.m. on Channel 4. Rivals, which is the adaptation of Jilly Cooper's novel with David Tennant, Aidan Turner, Danny Dyer, and a whole bunch of other people. That's landing on Disney Plus on the 18th of October. The Office Australia, one of those forementioned versions of The Office, that lands on Prime Video over here. That's on the 18th of October if you want to see another version of The Office. The Devil's Hour, season 2, that lands on the 18th of October on Prime Video as well. That's Peter Capaldi and Jessica Raine in the brilliant genre-jumping psychological thriller. That is fantastic. I have seen 2 episodes of the second season. Not allowed to review it yet because it's still under embargo, but there is a video with Peter and Jessica with some very funny moments in it. That is up on our YouTube channel if you want to go and check that out. There's no real spoilers in that. It's just them sort of talking about the show and their characters and that sort of stuff. Go and check that out on the YouTube channel. But Devil's Hour, if you've not watched that, superb series. Second season starts on the 18th of October on Prime Video. There is a new show called Blackshaw, which is a police detective who returns to her hometown and becomes involved in a missing persons case, which is linked to a traumatic past in the town's dark history. That's coming to the UK TV streaming service You. That's on the 19th of October. D.I. Ray, that lands for its second season. It stars Parminder Nagra as a police detective. That's on ITV on the 20th of October at 9 p.m. Broken Wood Mysteries returns for its 10th season. That's on You and Drama on the 21st of October at 8 p.m. The Franchise, which is the new, looks quite funny comedy sort of based around a group of people trying to film a unruly cinematic universe for an unloved franchise movie, comes to Sky Comedy on the 21st of October at 10 p.m. That's called The Franchise. That looks like it's going to be very funny. And QI, or rather QIXL, I think it actually is, but season V, or 22 of that, returns with Sandy Toksvig and Alan. That's on BBC Two. It is back on BBC Two rather than BBC One. That's on the 22nd of October at 9 p.m. That lands for the new season of QI. I'm very much looking forward to that being back. So, some interesting stuff. There's quite a lot of stuff this week. I would urge you to go and watch Devil's Hour if you've not checked that out yet, because that is on Prime Video and you do have access to that. So definitely worth going to check that out. I will be going to look at 911 as well, even though I think they may have jumped the shark slightly as they opened the episode with a bee tornado, which is literally a tornado made of bees, apparently. I haven't seen it. I can't entirely judge, but that is apparently what the opening episode is based around.
I would say it's a bunch of dogs with bees coming out of their mouths, but most people aren't going to get that reference.
An interesting opening episode, apparently, for that. So we'll see what it's like. Lincoln Lawyer is also been fantastic. So, some really good stuff coming this week if you want to go and check out that. You, of course, don't really have a social media presence, but if you want to hear more of your stuff, you can go and find Robert over with Matt on Entertainment Talk, and there's lots and lots more podcasts over there. You're still doing gaming talk over there and a few other bits and pieces, I guess.
Yeah, we're still doing the gaming talk. I don't really jump in much with any of the other reviews because he's on kind of his own schedule and I'm on kind of a weird one with, between work from home and work in the office. Yeah. But we'll jump in for every now and then, like when we did the Fallout review together.
You can go and check more of Robert's stuff over there, along with Matt over at Entertainment Talk. I'm sure there'll be more moaning on the Manu podcast because I don't think they're doing particularly well at the moment. So there's going to be lots of that sort of stuff. And go and check out Gaming Talk and other stuff over there. For Daryl, who's also involved in the show, you can find him at HollywoodNorthNews.net for all those TV series you love, which are shot in Canada. For us, you can visit the website at geektown.co.uk throughout the week and see all the latest air date information. If you want to get in touch with your questions or comments, email us on podcast@geektown.co.uk. Leave a message on the website post. Find us at Geektown on Twitter, on Facebook at facebook.com/Geektown, YouTube at youtube.com/Geektown, Blue Sky at Geektown, Instagram at Geektown UK, TikTok at Geektown UK, and Threads at Geektown UK. That is everything. We shall see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.